For 80 years, the story of the USS Harder seemed complete, a legendary submarine commanded by a fearless captain, lost in battle somewhere off the coast of the Philippines. History books closed the chapter, museums displayed the medals, the Navy moved on, but 3,000 feet below the South China Sea, in waters so dark that sunlight has never touched the steel, a team of underwater explorers has just rewritten the final page. Using revolutionary four-dimensional photogrammetry technology, they have created a digital twin of the Harder wreck. Every rivet, every hatch, every scar on her hull is captured in stunning detail. What they found on that silent ocean floor does not match the story we have been told for generations. It reveals a tragedy far more complex than anyone imagined, and a truth that changes everything we thought we knew about America's deadliest submarine. Commander Samuel Dealey was called the Destroyer Killer. He sank more enemy warships than any submarine captain in United States history. His tactic was legendary, his courage unmatched, his Medal of Honor earned in blood and fire. And yet the scan shows something the Navy never explained. The fatal wound on the Harder tells a story of a final gamble, a moment where legend met reality, and 79 men paid the price. If you thought the mystery of the Destroyer Killer had been solved, think again. The ocean has finally given up its secrets, and what lies in the darkness will shock you. The announcement came in May of 2024, just days before Memorial Day. The Naval History and Heritage Command confirmed what a small team of obsessive explorers had spent years searching for. The wreck of the USS Harder, one of the most celebrated submarines in American history, had finally been found. Not through luck, not through accident, but through a methodical, painstaking hunt across thousands of square miles of ocean floor. The discovery belongs to Tim Taylor and his Lost 52 project, a private research organization with a singular mission. During World War II, the United States Navy lost 52 submarines in combat. More than 3,500 submariners went down with them, their final resting places unknown, their families left without graves to visit or answers to cling to. Taylor has dedicated his life to finding every single one of them. Before Harder, his team had already located Grayback, Stickleback, R-12, S-26, S-28, and Grunion. Each discovery brought closure to families who had waited generations for news. But Harder was different. Harder was the prize. The technology that made this possible would have seemed like science fiction to the men who served aboard her. Taylor's team deployed autonomous underwater vehicles equipped with advanced sonar systems, scanning the ocean floor in precise grids, searching for the telltale shape of a submarine among the endless mud and rock. When they found a promising target, they sent down remotely operated vehicles fitted with high-resolution cameras and laser mapping equipment. The process they used is called four-dimensional photogrammetry, a technique that captures not just the shape of an object, but its texture, its decay, and its relationship to the environment around it. Hundreds of thousands of images were stitched together into a seamless digital model. The result is not a photograph, it is a resurrection. The first images to emerge from that digital reconstruction stopped researchers in their tracks. There she was, 311 feet of American engineering, resting upright on her keel as if she had simply settled down to sleep. The bow pointed forward, still reaching toward a destination she would never reach. The stern sat level, undisturbed by the currents that have swept over her for 80 years. Submarines are notoriously difficult to identify on the ocean floor. Their cylindrical hulls look remarkably similar, their features obscured by corrosion and marine growth. But the preservation of this wreck was extraordinary. The quality of the scan allowed investigators to pick out details that confirmed her identity beyond any doubt. And then they saw the wound. Just aft of the conning tower, the hull bears a massive gash. Metal plates that once held back the crushing pressure of the deep are torn inward, peeled back like the skin of a fruit. This is not the gradual decay of time. This is not the slow surrender of steel to salt water. This is violence. This is the mark of a depth charge that found its target with devastating precision. For the first time in 80 years, we can see exactly how the Harder died. The conning tower itself remains largely intact, that distinctive silhouette rising from the deck like a monument. The periscope shears, the bridge fairwater, the gun platforms where her crew once manned their weapons against Japanese aircraft, all of it preserved in the cold darkness, frozen at the moment of destruction. Forensic analysts studying the model have traced the path of the blast, calculated the force of the explosion, and reconstructed the sequence of catastrophic flooding that followed. The evidence tells a story that words alone never could. But what makes this discovery truly remarkable is not just what the scan shows. It is what the scan means. For decades, the loss of the Harder existed only in fragments. Japanese records described an anti-submarine attack on the morning of August 24, 1944. American records noted that she failed to return. Somewhere between those two facts lay the truth, buried beneath 3,000 feet of water and 8 decades of silence. Now that silence has been broken, the scan does not merely show us a wreck, it shows us a timeline, it shows us a battle, it shows us the final seconds of 79 American lives. The Navy has designated the site a war grave, protected under United States law from any disturbance. No artifacts will be recovered, no divers will enter her compartments. The Harder will rest where she fell, undisturbed for as long as the ocean allows. But the digital model ensures that her story can finally be told in full. Every researcher, every historian, every family member who lost someone aboard can now see what the sea has hidden for so long. And yet the scan raises as many questions as it answers. The damage tells us how she sank, but it does not tell us why she was there in the first place. It does not explain the decisions that led to that fatal morning. It does not reveal the mind of the man who commanded her, the legend who pushed himself and his crew beyond all reasonable limits. To understand what the Harder's wreck truly reveals, you must first understand the man who made her famous. His name was Samuel Dealey. They called him the Destroyer Killer. His story is unlike anything you have ever heard. Samuel David Dealey was born in Dallas, Texas on September 13, 1906. His uncle was George Bannerman Dealey, the powerful publisher of the Dallas Morning News, and the man for whom Dealey Plaza would later be named. That same plaza would become infamous in 1963 as the site of President Kennedy's assassination. But long before that tragedy, the Dealey name had already been written into history by a quiet young man who chose the sea over the newsroom. Those who served with Dealey in the years before the war described him in terms that seem almost contradictory to the legend he would become. A quiet officer, not a colorful one, reserved, methodical, not the type to seek glory or draw attention to himself. He graduated from the Naval Academy in 1930, served on battleships and destroyers, and eventually found his way to the submarine service. Nothing in his early career suggested that he would become the most aggressive submarine commander America had ever produced. When war came, everything changed. Dealey took command of the newly commissioned Harder on December 2, 1942, less than a year after Pearl Harbor. He was her first captain. He would be her only captain. From the moment he brought her into the Pacific, he began to develop a reputation that spread through the submarine force like wildfire. Other captains played it safe, attacking from distance, avoiding contact with enemy escorts. Dealey did the opposite. He actively sought out the most dangerous targets on the ocean, Japanese destroyers. In the brutal calculus of submarine warfare, destroyers were the enemy you avoided at all costs. They were fast, maneuverable, and specifically designed to hunt submarines. Their sonar could find you in the deep. Their depth charges could crush your hull like paper. A submarine that encountered a destroyer had one job: run, hide, survive. The idea of attacking a destroyer head-on was considered suicidal. Dealey turned that logic inside out. He developed a technique that would become his signature, a maneuver so dangerous that most captains refused to attempt it even once. He called it the down-the-throat shot. Instead of fleeing when a destroyer charged toward him, Dealey would turn his bow directly at the oncoming ship. He would wait, periscope raised, watching the enemy grow larger and larger in his crosshairs. At ranges that defied belief, sometimes as close as 900 yards, he would fire his torpedoes straight down the throat of the charging destroyer. Then he would dive, passing directly beneath the enemy ship as his torpedoes struck home. The physics of this maneuver bordered on impossible. Torpedoes required time to arm after launch. A destroyer at full speed could cover 1,000 yards in less than a minute. The margin for error was measured in seconds. If the torpedoes missed, if they failed to arm, if they ran off course, the destroyer would be directly on top of the submarine before Dealey could escape. There would be no second chance. And yet, time after time, Dealey made it work. His contact reports became legendary throughout the Pacific Fleet. After sinking the destroyer Ikazuchi in April 1944, Dealey sent a message that would be repeated in wardrooms and officer clubs for decades to come. Expended 4 torpedoes and 1 Japanese destroyer. 7 words that captured everything about the man. No boasting, no drama, just cold, professional efficiency. But it was his 5th war patrol that transformed Dealey from respected captain into a living legend. In June 1944, Harder was assigned to patrol the waters around Tawi-Tawi, a Japanese fleet anchorage in the southwestern Philippines. The mission was reconnaissance, observing enemy movements and reporting on ship concentrations. What happened instead was a massacre. Over the course of 4 days, Dealey encountered destroyer after destroyer, and one by one, he killed them. Minotsky went down on June 6th, torn apart by torpedoes fired at point-blank range. Hayanami followed the next day, her boilers erupting in a tremendous explosion as Harder passed beneath her keel. On June 9th, Dealey caught 2 destroyers overlapping in his periscope view and fired 4 torpedoes that sent Tanakaze to the bottom in seconds. The 4th shot hit a second ship that vanished in a blinding flash. 5 Japanese destroyers sank in 5 short-range torpedo attacks. The shockwaves from his own kills were so powerful that they rocked the Harder violently, slamming crewmen into bulkheads and rattling equipment loose from its mountings. Each time, Dealey pressed on. The strategic impact was enormous. Japanese Admiral Suemu Toyoda became convinced that a squadron of American submarines had encircled Tawi-Tawi. The anchorage was no longer safe, and he ordered the entire fleet to sortie, abandoning the position a full day ahead of schedule. That premature departure disrupted Japanese battle plans and directly contributed to their catastrophic defeat in the Battle of the Philippine Sea. 1 submarine, 1 captain, had altered the course of the Pacific War. When Harder returned to port, Dealey was showered with honors. He received his 4th Navy Cross. General Douglas MacArthur personally awarded him the Army Distinguished Service Cross, a rare distinction for a naval officer. His crew worshipped him. His superiors marveled at his results. The press dubbed him the Destroyer Killer, and the name stuck. But those closest to Dealey saw something else beneath the glory. They saw exhaustion. They saw strain. His executive officer, Frank Lynch, later recalled finding his captain in a state of mild shock, unable to make a decision. The patrol reports noted that fatigue of all hands approached a dangerous stage several times. 6 war patrols in 18 months, almost continuous combat, and dozens of depth charge attacks survived. The human body was not designed to endure that kind of pressure indefinitely. Lynch was qualified for command. He was ready to take over. Several senior officers quietly suggested that Dealey needed rest, that he should be rotated back to the States for recovery. The debate rippled through the submarine service. How much could one man give before it was too much? Rear Admiral Ralph Waldo Christie made the final decision. He approved 1 more patrol. Dealey would take the Harder out again. It was August 1944. The crew loaded torpedoes, topped off fuel tanks, and checked every system twice. They were the most successful submarine team in the United States Navy, and they were heading back to war. None of them would ever return. The Harder departed Fremantle, Australia on August 5, 1944, as part of a 5-boat wolf pack assigned to the South China Sea. Her companions were some of the finest submarines in the Pacific Fleet: United States ship Hado, United States ship Hake, United States ship Gitaro, and United States ship Ray. Together they would sweep the waters off Luzon, hunting Japanese convoys, disrupting enemy supply lines, and preparing the way for the American reconquest of the Philippines. For the first 2 weeks, the patrol was everything Dealey could have hoped for. The Wolfpack found targets and destroyed them. Convoys scattered before their coordinated attacks. On August 21, in a chaotic nighttime engagement off Paluan Bay, 4 enemy merchantmen went to the bottom. The following day, Harder and Hado caught 3 Japanese frigates in the pre-dawn darkness near Manila Bay. Working in deadly coordination, the 2 submarines tore the escorts apart. Dealey personally accounted for Matsuwa and Hibari, sending both ships down in flames. His torpedo count was climbing, his legend was growing, but the pace was relentless. Hado expended her torpedoes and departed for replenishment on August 23, leaving Harder and Hake to continue the hunt alone. Intelligence suggested that a damaged Japanese destroyer, the Asakaze, had been towed into Desol Bay on the western coast of Luzon. Dealey and the commander of Hake, Lieutenant Commander Frank Haler, positioned themselves outside the bay to intercept any ships that emerged. They waited through the night, watching, listening, preparing for whatever dawn might bring. What emerged from that bay on the morning of August 24th would seal the Harder's fate. Shortly before dawn, Haler picked up the sound of screws on his sonar. 2 ships were moving out of Dasol Bay, heading into open water. Initial identification suggested a Japanese minesweeper and a 3-stack destroyer that resembled the old Siamese warship Fra Ruang. But the identification was wrong. The ships were actually the escort vessel CD-22 and a patrol boat designated PB-102. Actually, the story takes a turn so strange that no fiction writer would dare invent it. Patrol Boat 102 was not a Japanese ship. She had been built in Philadelphia in 1920 and commissioned into the United States Navy as USS Stewart, a Clemson-class destroyer. For 2 decades, she served American interests in the Pacific, patrolling Chinese waters, protecting American citizens during times of unrest, conducting the routine duties of peacetime naval operations. When war came, Stewart was stationed in the Dutch East Indies, fighting alongside Allied forces against the Japanese advance. In February 1942, Stewart was damaged during the Battle of Badung Strait and placed in a floating dry dock at Surabaya for repairs. But a freak accident caused her to fall from the keel blocks, bending her propeller shafts and cracking her hull. With Japanese forces closing in on Java, there was no time for proper repairs. Her crew scuttled her in the dry dock, set demolition charges, and escaped before the enemy arrived. The Japanese found the wreck. They raised her. They repaired her. And in September 1943, they commissioned her into the Imperial Japanese Navy as Patrol Boat 102. Her funnels were modified to look more Japanese. Her guns were replaced with captured Dutch weapons, but her hull retained the unmistakable lines of an American four-piper destroyer. For the rest of the war, American pilots would report sightings of a ghost ship, an American vessel operating deep within enemy waters, flying the rising sun. Now that ghost ship was emerging from Dassel Bay, heading directly toward the position where Samuel Dealey waited in ambush. The sequence of events that followed has been reconstructed from the patrol report of USS Harder and from Japanese records recovered after the war. At 0647, Haler spotted USS Harder's periscope about 600 yards ahead of his own position. Both submarines were closing on the enemy contacts. Haler began his approach on CD-22. But something made him uneasy. The angle was wrong. The range was closing too fast. He broke off his attack and turned northward to reposition. As he turned, he saw Harder's periscope again, still tracking the enemy ships. At 0710, CD-22 detected a submarine contact. The escort began to maneuver, preparing for an anti-submarine attack. Haler later speculated that the Japanese ship may have had two targets on her sonar, both Harder and Harder, and was momentarily confused about which to pursue. But the confusion did not last long. Dealey did what Dealey always did. He turned toward the charging enemy and prepared to fire down the throat. Japanese records indicate that Harder launched 3 torpedoes at CD-22. It was the same tactic that had worked so many times before, the same impossible gamble that had made him the destroyer killer. But this time, the torpedoes did not find their mark. 2 passed wide to port, 1 passed wide to starboard. The escort ship evaded them all. What happened next took less than a minute. CD-22 counterattacked with a barrage of depth charges. At 0728, Haler heard 15 rapid explosions echoing through the water from somewhere astern. The sound was unmistakable. Heavy detonations clustered close together, the signature of a determined anti-submarine attack. Then silence. Haler continued evasive maneuvers, uncertain of his own safety, hoping that Dealey had escaped as he had so many times before. When he finally returned to the attack area hours later, he found nothing but a ring of Japanese marker buoys spanning a half-mile radius. The enemy had marked the spot where their depth charges had struck home. Japanese records recovered after the war filled in the final details. The 5th depth charge attack scored a direct hit. Oil bubbled to the surface, wood chips and cork floated in the wreckage. There were no survivors. The scan of the wreck confirms every element of this account. The massive gash aft of the conning tower shows exactly where the depth charge struck. The hull plating is torn inward, peeled back by the force of an explosion designed to crush submarines. The damage is concentrated, precise, catastrophic. One moment the Harder was a fighting ship. The next moment she was a steel coffin plunging toward the ocean floor. 79 men died in that instant. Among them was the destroyer killer himself, the man who had sunk more enemy warships than any submarine captain in history. His final gamble had failed. The tactic that had never let him down had finally met its limit. And watching from somewhere nearby, flying a flag that was not her own, was an American destroyer turned Japanese patrol boat, bearing silent witness to the death of a legend. The news of the Harder's loss sent shockwaves through the submarine force. Men who had served with Dealey, men who had watched his career with admiration and sometimes disbelief, struggled to comprehend how the destroyer killer could have fallen to a single escort ship. He had survived so many encounters that seemed impossible. He had escaped depth charge attacks that should have crushed his boat. How could it end like this, in waters he had dominated for so long? The debate began almost immediately and has never truly ended. Noted submarine historian Clay Blair delivered the verdict that many had whispered but few dared to speak aloud. Dealey made 1 patrol too many. He should have been sent back to the States for rest after his 5th patrol. His executive officer Frank Lynch was qualified for command and ready to take over. The warning signs were there for anyone willing to see them. Fatigue, strain, moments of hesitation that had never troubled him before. The relentless pace of combat had worn him down to the bone. But who bears responsibility for that decision? Rear Admiral Ralph Waldo Christie approved the 6th patrol. He knew what others were saying about Dealey's condition. He knew the risks. And yet he signed the orders that sent the Harder back to sea. In the years that followed, Christie would carry that burden in ways both public and private. He pushed relentlessly for Dealey to receive the Medal of Honor, a campaign that became tangled in bitter politics and personal rivalries within the Navy. Vice Admiral Thomas Kinkaid opposed the medal, arguing that Dealey had already been adequately honored with the Army Distinguished Service Cross. The dispute between Christie and Kinkaid grew so acrimonious that it contributed to Christie being relieved of his command in December 1944. The medal was eventually awarded, presented posthumously to Dealey's widow Edwina by President Harry Truman in 1945. But the controversy surrounding that award speaks to a deeper question that the submarine service never fully resolved. How much should we ask of our best men? When does courage become recklessness? When does one more mission become one mission too many? The wreck offers no answers to these questions. It shows us only the outcome. For 80 years, the families of the Harder's crew had nothing. No grave to visit, no marker to place flowers upon, no certainty about where their fathers and grandfathers and great-uncles had come to rest. They knew only that somewhere in the vastness of the Pacific, 79 men had vanished into the deep. The Navy declared Harder presumed lost on January 2, 1945. Presumed. Not confirmed. Not found. Just gone. Tim Taylor understands what that uncertainty means to a family. He has spent years listening to their stories, bearing witness to grief that spans generations. When he speaks about his work with the Lost 52 project, he does not talk about shipwrecks or historical discoveries. He talks about people. It is not about finding wrecks. It is not about finding ships. The loss of someone and not knowing where they are leaves a hole in families. The importance of our work is to connect families and bring some type of closure and peace even generations later. The scan of the Harder is now a war grave, protected under United States law. No salvage operations will disturb her rest. No artifact hunters will pick through the debris. The 79 men who died aboard her will remain at their stations, frozen in the positions they held when the depth charge struck. Torpedo men at their tubes, engineers at their controls, officers at their posts, a captain at his command. The Navy has notified the families of every crew member. After 80 years of silence, they finally know where their loved ones lie. And there is one final irony that history has preserved in steel and salt water. Patrol Boat 102, the former USS Stewart, survived the war. American forces found her in Kure, Japan, rat-infested and decrepit. Bearing the scars of years of hard service under a foreign flag, the Navy recommissioned her in an emotional ceremony, raised the American flag over her deck once more, and towed her home to San Francisco. In May 1946, she was used for target practice and sunk off the California coast. Her wreck was located in August 2024 by Ocean Infinity, just months after the Harder was found. Two ships whose fates intertwined on that terrible morning in Dassault Bay. One American submarine, one American destroyer turned enemy patrol boat. Both now resting on the ocean floor, their stories finally complete. But questions remain. The scan shows us the fatal wound on the Harder's hull. It does not show us what happened inside the boat during those final seconds. Did Dealey attempt emergency procedures? Did the crew have any warning before the depth charge struck? Did anyone survive the initial blast only to be trapped as the flooding began? The compartments of the Harder hold answers that we may never retrieve. Her interior remains unexplored, a sealed tomb beneath 3,000 feet of water. The Lost 52 project continues its work. Of the 52 American submarines lost in World War II, many remain missing. Each one carries its own crew, its own story, its own families still waiting for news. The technology that found the Harder grows more sophisticated every year. Sonar systems become more precise. Autonomous vehicles can search deeper and longer. The ocean gives up its secrets slowly, but it does give them up. Rear Admiral Samuel Cox, director of the Naval History and Heritage Command, spoke for the Navy when he announced the discovery. Harder was lost in the course of victory. We must not forget that victory has a price, as does freedom. The wreck of the Harder is not a monument to failure. It is evidence of what winning cost. It is proof that the freedom we enjoy today was purchased by men who gave everything they had and then gave more. Samuel Dealey and his crew did not die because they were careless or unlucky. They died because they were willing to take risks that others would not take, to fight in ways that others could not fight, to push themselves beyond the limits of endurance in service of a cause larger than themselves. The sea kept their secret for 80 years. Now that secret belongs to history. And for the 79 men of the Harder, after 8 decades of silence, the ocean has finally spoken. So what do you think? Should Dealey have been sent home after his 5th patrol? Or was one more mission the only choice a man like him could make? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to know what questions you still have about the destroyer killer and the 79 men who followed him into the deep. Thanks for watching. Until next time, keep searching for the truth beneath the surface.